Trump declares a national emergency. It's been dubbed the Huawei ban. What does this mean for security? And how will this affect Huawei's global ambitions? Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order saying no way to Huawei. Well, technically, it doesn't actually say that. What it does say is executive order on securing the information and communications, technology, and services supply chain. But a title like that is totally untweetable, so everyone's just calling it the Huawei ban. To be fair, Trump's executive order doesn't actually name Huawei, but everyone knows who he's talking about. It's like that time in college when the dining hall took away all the waffle makers because somebody kept breaking in at 2 a.m. and stealing waffles. Dave. Anyway, Huawei is the world's largest provider of networking gear and the world's #2 smartphone vendor behind Samsung. For years, congressional committees, the FBI, the NSA, and others have warned of close ties between Huawei and the Chinese Communist Party. Last year, the U.S. government banned the U.S. government from using equipment made by Huawei and the other big Chinese telecom company ZTE. That was over security concerns. But the new executive order took that ban a big step further. First, Trump declared a national emergency. And before you think, here Trump goes again declaring another national emergency, it's actually pretty common. Obama declared 13 national emergencies. George W. Bush declared 14, and Clinton also declared 14. So really, there's a lot more national emergencies for President Trump to declare before his term is up. He's probably got a list. Anyway, here's how Trump's current national emergency works. The executive order itself stops the use of IT goods and services from all companies subject to foreign adversaries that pose unacceptable risks to national security. Then, the Commerce Department effectively labeled Huawei as belonging to one of those foreign adversaries, i.e. China, by putting Huawei and 72 of its affiliates on the Commerce Department's Entity List. The Entity List is a trade blacklist. Anyone on it is barred from buying parts and components from U.S. companies without getting the U.S. government's approval first. And that approval is no easy thing. That's because the ban has a so-called policy of presumption of denial, meaning it's a no unless there's a really, really good reason to say yes. And the U.S. government has determined that there is reasonable cause to believe that Huawei has been involved in activities contrary to the national security or foreign policy interests of the United States. So I'm guessing Huawei purchases are generally going to be a no.
All the witnesses, I'd like to address this question to you. Will you please raise your hand if you would use products or services from Huawei or ZTE? None of you would. You obviously lead intelligence services, so that's something of a biased question. Raise your hand if you would recommend that private American citizens use Huawei or ZTE products or services. None of you, again, are raising your hand. Thank you for that.
Senator Cotton raises an important point. Or I assume he did because I was distracted by the way that he kept mispronouncing Huawei. It's Huawei with an H, people. It's not Huawei. Stop saying it like that. Now, if you're wondering what the heads of U.S. intelligence services know about Huawei that the average person does not, here's FBI Director Christopher Wray.
It provides the capacity to maliciously modify or steal information, and it provides the capacity to conduct undetected espionage.
Simply put, officials are worried that Huawei will help the Chinese regime spy on the U.S. or attack America's cyber infrastructure. How might Huawei do that specifically? One way is that companies like Huawei might sell products compromised by back doors that allow Chinese government hackers access to data or surveillance. Although frankly, I'm more concerned that if we put all our technology in the hands of equipment made in China, one day it will simply stop working. And when we try to reach customer service, we keep getting redirected to the Chinese consulate, and they don't even have our package. Now, back in 2011 and 2012, Vodafone did find hidden backdoors in Huawei equipment, and there have been other reports of Huawei backdoors. But it's not clear whether Huawei purposefully included these backdoors or whether they were accidental security flaws resulting from bad design. Either way is bad. So, is there smoking gun evidence that Huawei is putting backdoors into its technology designed to allow it to spy on users? No. But there's plenty of reason to believe they would be motivated to, like Huawei's uncomfortably close links to the armed wing of the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Liberation Army.
Huawei is the PLA. And if the senior executives of Huawei don't like me saying that, then bring it. I would love to have discovery in this one. You are the People's Liberation Army.
I know what you're thinking. Steve Bannon, he's probably just trying to rile people up by mispronouncing Huawei and mentioning the PLA. It turns out no, Bannon just doesn't know how to pronounce Huawei either. Also, the founder and CEO of Huawei, Ren Zhengfei, was an engineer with the People's Liberation Army. And last year, for the 40th anniversary of China's so-called reform and opening up, Ren Zhengfei was hailed as one of 100 excellent private entrepreneurs who firmly safeguard the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. So much for being a totally independent private company. But the Trump administration's moves have already hamstrung Huawei. For now, the Commerce Department's entity list has had the biggest effect. That's the one that prevents U.S. companies from selling to Huawei. According to Bloomberg, top U.S. tech companies have already begun to cut off the supply of microchips and other technology to Huawei. Chinese state-run media has gone on the defensive, saying the Huawei ban is nothing and will be totally fine without chips from American suppliers. And really, who wants made-in-America chips anyway? Huawei's chip arm, HiSilicon, said last Friday it's been prepared for the scenario that it could be banned from purchasing U.S. chips and technology. HiSilicon says it's been vigorously investing in self-developed technologies and is able to ensure a steady supply of most products to make sure Huawei will be able to continue serving its customers. Or, as HiSilicon president said in a letter cited by Straits Times, now is the time for all the spare tires in the safe to become useful. Okay, firstly, who keeps tires in a safe? Secondly, what does a microchip company do with tires anyway? I think what we really need is a ban on stupid metaphors. Anyway, Huawei's CEO also insisted that Huawei is totally ready for the ban, while also briefly noting that the company's annual revenue growth may undershoot 20%. That's a lot to undershoot. It's like if you're flying from New York to San Francisco and you undershoot by 20%, you'll end up in Battle Mountain, Nevada. And no one wants to end up in Battle Mountain, Nevada. It's the armpit of America. And while Chinese media are saying there's nothing to see here, the Chinese Foreign Ministry sure is crying foul.
We call upon the U.S. to stop using the excuse of security issues to indiscriminately suppress Chinese companies and provide a fair, just environment devoid of discrimination for Chinese companies investing and operating in the U.S.
Yes, it's very unfair for the U.S. to discriminate against Chinese companies. How could a country just outright ban foreign tech companies from operating in their market? So unjust. And on a totally unrelated note, Google, one of numerous American tech companies that have been blocked from the market in China. Google announced it would cut Huawei off from some of the Android software that Huawei runs on. Specifically, Huawei won't be able to license the Android operating system with Google services, and will instead have to use a bare-bones, open-sourced version of Android. And that means Huawei is in trouble.
Half of all of its shipments are sold outside of China, and all of those shipments depend on Google services being present on them. And if they're not present on them, no matter really how good anything Huawei comes up with, they're going to have a really difficult time selling devices outside of China. And that is the essence of the problem.
One tech industry consultant said it will be like an instant kill switch for Huawei's ambition to overtake Samsung in the global market. But Huawei has a little more time to figure it out, because earlier this week the Commerce Department issued a temporary license that allows Huawei to do business with U.S. companies for 90 days. That means if you have a Huawei phone, you can get your Android updates until August. After that, Huawei will roll out its own software. I hear that when you use Huawei Maps, no matter where you are in the world, you're still within China's 9-dash line. So what do you think about the Huawei ban? Leave your comments below. And while you're here, it's time for me to answer another question from a fan who supports China Uncensored with $1 or more per episode through the crowdfunding website Patreon. XX A Mighty Storm XX asks, I've been thinking of getting a Huawei phone and just Google pro-Chinese stuff on it to make sure that I get to be in the good foreigners for China bracket in the CCP. Do you guys think that would work? Well, if you get a Huawei phone, you might not be able to do much Googling on it after all. But as for the idea of a foreigner saying pro-CCP things on your phone to get in their good graces, don't bother. You'll waste your time because no one will bother monitoring you. And unless you're actually working for a Chinese company in China, it's not going to help you get a promotion. Now, if you want to do it much more publicly, maybe someone will notice and get you a job working for a Chinese state-run media, where you can spend all day posting stories about pandas. It's hard to imagine a worse job. Thanks for your question. And thanks for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time.